Hey guys, tonight we travel to the beginning of a mystery that's been walked by sandals and selfie sticks alike, the birthplace of Jesus. Picture this, narrow streets echoing with soft Arabic, Christmas lights strung above stone archways, the scent of roasting lamb wafting from nearby homes. It's Bethlehem, or at least it's what we've been told is Bethlehem. And just to set expectations straight, this isn't your average holiday postcard. We're peeling back layers of time, religion, and surprisingly aggressive real estate competition. You're about to question GPS coordinates set 2,000 years ago. You probably won't survive this spiritually intact, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is, because there's something extra cozy about knowing we're all exploring these mysteries together, no matter the time zone. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in Bethlehem, soft shoes padding over worn cobblestone. Tour buses idle like sleepy camels outside the Church of the Nativity, pilgrims streaming through the low stone door, stooping low, physically and spiritually. Inside, gold icons flicker in candlelight, incense clings to your coat, and a priest chants in ancient Greek. Below your feet, down a cramped staircase, is the spot. The silver star embedded in the marble floor says, "Here Jesus Christ was born." You kneel, but part of you wonders, how do we know this is the spot? That's where the mystery begins. Because the Gospel of Luke says Mary and Joseph traveled to Bethlehem for a census, but Rome didn't normally require people to register in their ancestral towns. Historians still argue whether such a census ever happened that way at all. And get this, Bethlehem was a tiny backwater. The kind of town where everyone knows your business and your donkey's name. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to host the birth of someone who would split time in half. Unless, of course, prophecy demanded it. Micah 5:2 predicted the Messiah would come from Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah. So maybe the story was shaped to fit the prophecy. Or maybe prophecy shaped history. It's a theological chicken and egg situation. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The current Church of the Nativity was built in the 4th century by Emperor Constantine's mother, Helena, who essentially played ancient Christian archaeology bingo. She marked the spot based on local tradition and possibly some politically savvy guesswork. But here's the quirky fringe twist. Some researchers suggest the wrong Bethlehem may have been immortalized. Yup, there's another one. A small village called Bethlehem of Galilee, just a few miles from Nazareth. Quiet, unassuming, no gold stars. But some scholars argue this could have been the real deal, especially if Jesus spent most of his life in the Galilee region anyway. Still, Bethlehem of Judea had the weight of scripture, and over time, it stuck. Yet the pun contractions don't stop. Matthew's gospel says the family lived in Bethlehem from the start. Luke says they traveled there temporarily. And John skips over the whole thing, as if it's not even relevant. You pass an old olive tree and wonder, were the gospels written for history or for something deeper? Maybe this isn't about exact coordinates. Maybe the manger wasn't meant to be a pinned location, but a message. Born not in a palace, not in Rome, but somewhere forgotten, humble, cold. That idea resonates more deeply than any GPS tag. But if we're talking places, Bethlehem is Zeptum. Just the first. And already, the mystery is murky. You're standing where millions have stood before, each believing the same thing, touching the star, whispering prayers, snapping blurry photos. Yet beneath that marble is dirt, the same dirt that has absorbed blood, incense, ash, rain, and time. Maybe the where isn't as important as the why, or the who. Still, the idea gnaws at you. What if we've built centuries of reverence on the wrong patch of ground? Then again, maybe the holiness comes not from the place, but from the story it allows us to tell. You rise from the stone star, brushing dust from your knees. A small child whispers the Our Father beside you, and a Greek nun lights another candle. Outside, the moon rises over the ancient rooftops. Cats slink between shadows, and you wonder, if this wasn't the spot, does it change anything? Or does it make the mystery even better? You leave Bethlehem behind, its golden churches shrinking in your rearview mirror, and head north, toward a small hill town where legends whisper louder than the wind. You're going to Nazareth. Yes, that Nazareth. Jesus' supposed hometown, the place where he grew up, learned carpentry, possibly scraped a knee or two. But tonight, you're not just sightseeing, you're investigating whether Nazareth actually existed. You coast into the modern city past falafel joints and souvenir shops selling Jesus was here, tea, shirts. Tour groups swarm toward the Basilica of the Annunciation, snapping selfies by the angel statue. It's bustling, loud, surprisingly neon, lit for a place meant to radiate quiet holiness. But here's the deal. For a long time, historians couldn't find any clear archaeological evidence that first-century Nazareth even existed. Cue dramatic music. Seriously. In the 1800s and well into the 20th century, skeptics argued that Nazareth was just a literary invention, a symbolic name attached to a theological narrative. You walk the winding streets, and part of you wonders, was it all made up? Now before you throw your sandals at the screen, here's the mainstream historical fact. In 2009, archaeologists finally uncovered a house in Nazareth dating back to the 1st century, with stone walls, cooking pots, and even a cistern. It proved that at least some people lived here during Jesus' lifetime. But the town was tiny. Think cave, homes, maybe 50 to 200 residents total. So small it wouldn't have made it onto a Roman map. A blink and you miss it kind of place. Which frankly makes perfect sense for someone whose birth story was already dripping in divine humility. Still, the mystery remains. The Gospel of John has Nathanael sneering, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" That would only make sense if Nazareth was known and kind of unimpressive. But if it was that well known, why wasn't it mentioned in the Old Testament, or Roman records, or any outside source? Historians still argue whether the absence of evidence means anything at all. Some say Nazareth was just too small to matter in the historical record. Others say its sudden emergence in scripture feels suspiciously convenient. You stand near the well in Mary's courtyard, watching a woman in jeans refill her water bottle. The stone looks ancient, smoothed by centuries of hands. Tradition says this was Mary's well, the same one where the angel Gabriel appeared with a world-altering message. It's a powerful moment, but again, how much is faith and how much is topographical storytelling? Here's your quirky fringe tidbit. There's a theory that Nazarene didn't refer to a place at all. Instead, some argue it was a coded reference to a sect of Judaism, the Nazarene, a fringe apocalyptic group with roots in Galilee. If true, that would mean Jesus wasn't from Nazareth in the geographical sense, but a Nazarene in the ideological one. You squint at a cracked wall near the basilica. Paint flakes from the surface like ancient truth shedding their polish. Could it be that Nazareth was never meant to be pinned on a map? Of course, tourism boards prefer the concrete version, and you get it. There's a sacredness to standing in the place where it might have all begun, even if it's mostly modern apartments now. Even if the old caves are tucked under chapels and guarded by sleepy priests who've seen one too many spiritual crises. Still, something about the silence in those back alleys gets under your skin. You hear kids laughing in Arabic and Hebrew, cars honking, church bells ringing, and yet the deeper hum of mystery, of unknowing, lingers just beneath the noise. Maybe Nazareth wasn't meant to be glorious. Maybe its whole point was that it wasn't. You remember that Bethlehem was supposed to be least among the clans. Maybe Nazareth was part 2 of that same poetic message, a Messiah from nowhere, a carpenter from dust. You sip tea at a rooftop cafe, watching night wrap around the hills like a prayer shawl. The town glows orange and yellow in the distance. Somewhere below, the Basilica of the Annunciation locks its gates for the evening. Pilgrims retreat to hotels. Street cats resume ownership of the alleys. And you lean back, the mystery settling in your chest. Was Nazareth real? Yes. Was it that Nazareth? That we'll never fully know. But you smile to yourself, because mystery isn't the enemy of faith. Sometimes it's the doorway into it. You wake before dawn and head southeast, guided by the faintest blush of sunlight spilling across the hills. Your sandals crunch over dry pebbles as the city fades behind you. There's no traffic here. No neon signs, just silence, wind, and a land so barren it feels like the earth forgot to finish it. You're entering the wilderness, not metaphorically, the actual Judean wilderness, the kind of place that bleaches your thoughts clean, that hums with ancient loneliness. You squint into the rocky wasteland and think, this is where Jesus went to face himself, or something deeper. The Gospels say Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where he fasted for 40 days and was tempted by the devil. And while that sentence gets tossed around in Sunday schools like it's a simple hike, you're here now, and this place doesn't do simple. It's desolate, haunting, and hot enough to make you question your life choices. Mainstream historians agree that desert retreats were common among Jewish mystics and ascetics of the time. The Essenes, a fringe sect possibly linked to the Dead Sea Scrolls, lived out here too, obsessively pure, wildly apocalyptic, and really into communal bathing. They believed the end of days was near, and that the desert was the best place to wait it out. Fringe theory time. Some argue Jesus may have spent time with these Essenes, maybe even been trained by them. The fasting, the focus on purification, the obsession with spiritual battles. It all lines up a little too well, but no ancient text says that directly. It's speculation, stitched together like a desert quilt. You press onward, your feet kicking up dust. A hawk circles high above, its wings slicing the air in silence. Below, the hills ripple like frozen waves, sandstone ridges twisted by millennia of wind and nothingness. Somewhere among these ridges, legend says, Jesus stood on a high place and was offered all the kingdoms of the world, which is dramatic, but also strange. This desert doesn't have a sweeping view of global empires. It barely has enough flat land to pitch a tent. Historians still argue whether that temptation scene was symbolic, visionary, or a literal hilltop chat with Satan himself. Some say it's theological poetry, Jesus facing greed, ego, and hunger in their purest forms. Others think it might point to real practices of ecstatic visions during prolonged fasting, especially in isolated regions like this. And hey, let's not skip over the practical stuff. 40 days of fasting in this heat, no food, maybe no water. That's not just spiritual discipline. That's one stomach growl away from becoming a National Geographic cautionary tale. You duck into a cave for shade. It smells of dust, old ash, maybe even damp goat fur. These are the kinds of caves where people used to sleep, pray, hide. Some monastic communities still do. The rocks are cool, grounding. You imagine Jesus crouched here, alone, sweat drying on his skin, heart pounding, not just from hunger, but from the weight of whatever this was supposed to mean. There's no trail markers out here, no plaques that say Temptation Hill, 200 meters, just desert and questions. At some point, you pass a crumbling stone wall, half-buried, sun-bleached. Locals whisper that hermits once lived here, maybe even prophets. It's not impossible. There's a centuries-old tradition of spiritual seekers wandering this wilderness looking for answers. Some came back with revelations, others just didn't. Here's a fun but weird tidbit. In the early centuries, some Christians believed that wild beasts Jesus encountered weren't just animals, but symbols of inner demons. So that scorpion that crawled too close, not just a scorpion, a metaphor, or maybe a talking temptation in disguise. Who's to say? And remember, there's no sign of Jesus doing flashy miracles here. No thunderbolts, no levitating stones, just hunger, isolation, and an inner wrestling match that left him presumably stronger, or maybe broken in ways we'll never know. You rise from the cave and start walking again, blinking sweat from your eyes. A trail of ants cuts across your path, minding their own business. You wonder how much of the wilderness experience was internal. Did Jesus hear voices, hallucinate visions? Was the devil a real figure beside him, or a mirror in his mind? You'll never know for sure. None of us will. None of us will. But in the silence, you start to feel the lesson. This place is made for emptying, stripping down, letting the noise fall away. You begin to understand why prophets come here, why they come to wrestle with shadows in broad daylight. By the time the sun tips toward the western hills, your throat is dry, your head dizzy, and the town you left feels like a lifetime ago. You perch on a rock and look out over the jagged landscape. Somewhere in this wilderness, a man once faced himself and walked out changed. You pull your cloak tighter and wonder if the real mystery of the place is that it changes you too. You drift down toward the edge of the Sea of Galilee, and for a moment, just a moment, you forget this is a story about mystery. The water gleams like poured silver, cradled by soft hills that slope like sleeping giants. Birds skitter along the reeds. The scent of tilapia, called Stet Peter's fish around here, wafts from a lakeside grill someone forgot to turn off. You've arrived in Capernaum. Or what's left of it. Jesus called this place home for a good stretch of his public life. He preached here, healed here, maybe even rented a humble room above someone's fishing nets. You walk across the black basalt stones of the ruined town, stepping into a time capsule that feels both sacred and suspiciously neat. There's a church hovering over what's supposed to be Peter's house. Yes, hovering. It's a sci-fi style. Structure on stilts, with a glass floor so you can peer down at a circle of ancient walls. Archaeologists declared that this humble home, once just a fisherman's pad, became an early Christian worship site. So naturally, it's now a destination for pilgrims, selfie sticks, and hopeful prayers. But here's the kicker. Historians still argue whether this really is Peter's house. Or just a house that got lucky because someone scribbled a cross on it a few centuries later. You meander past a synagogue with columns reaching up like white bone fingers. The current ruins date to the 4th century, but beneath it, there it is, a darker stone foundation, rough and old. That's likely from the actual 1st century synagogue where Jesus is said to have taught. Picture it, dim oil lamps, the hush of a curious crowd, a poor man's prophet reading scrolls and tossing verbal grenades at the local elite. Mainstream scholars mostly agree Jesus was real, he lived in Galilee, and he likely spent time here, but fringe theories swirl like desert dust. Some claim Capernaum wasn't his hub at all, that he preferred smaller, less documented hamlets. Others argue the whole home base idea is a narrative device to tie loose ends in the Gospels together, like a sitcom needing a central coffee shop. You sit beside the ancient street, more like a glorified alley, where carts once creaked and kids probably chased chickens. You try to imagine Jesus here barefoot, dusty, laughing with fishermen who reeked of lake water and ambition. It's humanizing, grounded, until you remember that same Jesus supposedly calmed a storm on this very sea, walked across these very waves like a celestial ghost on a nighttime stroll. But the lake doesn't tell you that, it just sparkles, non-committal. Over by the shoreline, there's a tree where modern pilgrims like to pray. Some say Jesus sat there. Others say he never would have chosen that exact shady spot, it's too close to where the gift shop now stands. You chuckle softly because mystery and modern convenience are always awkward roommates. Here's a quirky detail, the name Capernaum means village of Nahum, but there's no evidence Nahum the prophet ever lived here. That's kind of on brand, isn't it? A town built on a name that doesn't match, centered on a house that might not be Peter S, by a sea that may or may not have held up a man's sandals. And yet, you feel something, even if you peeled back every layer of historical guesswork, carbon. Dated every pebble, and disproved half the miracles with a skeptical shrug, something would remain, some echo, some ache of presence, because too many stories converge here. Too many people, ancient and modern, have stood by this lake and thought, maybe this is where it really happened. You trail your hand along the black stones of the town wall. This is the basalt of Galilee, volcanic, rugged, and unpretentious. The same stone used in 1st century homes, paths, even boats. Yes, actual fishing boats carved from these hills, one of which was discovered half, buried in the mud nearby. It's called the Jesus boat, though of course there's no evidence he ever stepped inside it. It's just close, mysteriously close. Historians still debate whether Capernaum was truly central to Jesus' mission, or just a convenient plot device, easy to reach, easy to leave. But as you sit by the lake, listening to the water lap against the rocks like an ancient lullaby, you find yourself caring less about the debates. Instead, you focus on the present moment. A single fishing boat floats in the distance, silhouetted against the fading light. It rocks gently, quietly, like it's waiting. And maybe that's the whole point. Not to prove or disprove, but to sit in the middle of the uncertainty and let the place work on you. The way it might have worked on him. You squeeze through the tangle of alleys in Jerusalem's old city, dodging tour groups, incense smoke, and stray cats with better real estate than most humans. Stone walls rise on either side, chipped and ancient, and everything smells like dust, spice, and faintly singed falafel. But you're not here for snacks, you're following the mystery trail toward one very specific room, the upper room, supposedly the site of Jesus' Last Supper. You arrive at a modest doorway on Mount Zion, nothing grand, unless you count the dramatic staircase that spits you out into what looks like a medieval banquet hall. Tall arches, Gothic windows, Arabic script on the walls, and the ceiling, pure Crusader drama. Wait, did Jesus really eat here? Short answer, probably not. Long answer, historians still argue whether the upper room you're standing in was even built before the 12th century. Yep. A full 1,000 years after Jesus supposedly reclined with his disciples over roasted lamb and betrayal.
It's like visiting Lincoln's log cabin and realizing it has central air and an espresso machine. So why is this the famous upper room? Well, partly because it's convenient, it's close to other holy sites, it's got centuries of tradition behind it. And tradition has a way of hardening into truth when enough tourists and bishops agree to go along with the program. But don't let that stop you, because the moment you close your eyes here, you can almost hear the clink of ceramic plates, the rustle of sandals on stone, the thick silence before Judas excuses himself with sweaty palms. The room may be newer than expected. but the weight of what supposedly happened here is very, very old. And just to complicate things further, some scholars believe the real upper room might have been part of someone's private home, hidden deep beneath today's tangled street grid. Others whisper about an alternative site entirely, off the main tourist path, beneath layers of forgotten archaeology and unapproved theory. Cue the fringe tidbit. A few decades ago, a team claimed they found a first-century Jewish-Christian meeting room beneath a nearby monastery. Stone benches, ritual baths, graffiti referencing early messianic hope. Could that be the real upper room? The Vatican didn't bite, but the rumor still floats around like warm peter smoke. Outside, the sounds of the city press against the walls, honking cars, calls to prayer, church bells overlapping like a divine DJ set. It's beautiful, it's chaotic. And it makes you wonder, if Jesus was here, if he really shared one last quiet meal before walking into history's most brutal ending, would he even recognize this place now? You walk past the tomb of David, yes, that David which just so happens to sit below the supposed upper room. Another traditional site with some fuzzy historical paperwork. Some say the layering of Jewish and Christian sacredness here was intentional, designed to link Jesus with David's royal bloodline, stacking symbolism like historical Jenga. You rest your hand on one of the stone pillars. It's cool, worn smooth by generations of other hands searching for connection. Whether this was the actual site or not, it feels sacred, which might be the most dangerous and wonderful thing about sacred places. Sometimes they're more about what people bring to them than what actually happened there. Still, you can't shake the unease. You look at the vaulted ceiling, the carved capitals, the modern metal chandeliers. It all feels out of sync. Like someone set up a Renaissance fair in the middle of a biblical flashback. There's even Arabic calligraphy above the mihrab. Yes, this space doubled as a mosque for centuries. That layering? It's not an accident. This room has lived 1,000 lives. As prayer hall, Crusader chapel, Sufi lodge, and yes, maybe, just maybe, a whisper of that first communion. Mainstream historians generally agree that some kind of commemorative space was established here by the early Byzantine period. But what it commemorated? That's murky. The first clear references to a Senecal, fancy Latin for upper room don't pop up until much later. So, if Jesus' final supper did happen in this city, the odds of this exact room witnessing it are slim to none. But here's where things get weird in the best way. People still treat it like the real deal. Pilgrims come and cry, sing, kneel. You might even catch a spontaneous group chorus of Amazing Grace sung in 12 different accents at once. Because, despite the architectural time travel, something happens here. A feeling, a chill. Maybe it's history echoing, or maybe it's your imagination finally getting its moment in the spotlight. You take a seat on one of the low benches and imagine the disciples around you, whispering nervously, glancing at Jesus with the kind of wide-eyed dread you get when someone says, "This will be my last meal with you." There's bread on the table, wine in clay cups, and a silence thick enough to swallow the centuries whole. And then, of course, the wild twist. Jesus gets up and washes their feet. King of Kings on his knees, scrubbing away road dust and human pride. You open your eyes. The modern room is back. The arches, the chandeliers, the Instagrammers lining up by the windows. But something lingers. Something ancient and quiet and unfinished. Maybe the room is wrong. Maybe the tradition is off by a few streets or centuries. But the memory is stubborn. You edge closer to a weather-worn hill just outside the walls of Old Jerusalem. The sun beats down like a divine spotlight. The air buzzing with 1,000 languages from tourists, pilgrims, and pickpockets alike. And somewhere between a gift shop selling authentic crown of thorns and a juice stand offering cold pomegranate, you find it the place of the skull. Golgotha, the site of Jesus' crucifixion. Or one of them, anyway. Because here's where things get slippery two places, both claiming the same sacred moment. One is a hulking stone church thick with incense and candle smoke. The other, a garden with a serene rock face that vaguely looks like a skull if you squint hard enough and ignore the bus depot below it. Let's start with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You shuffle through a maze of stone corridors, past flickering oil lamps and generations of soot. There's a line, always a line, And at the center is a shrine inside a shrine, layers upon layers of devotion, wrapped around a spot said to be Calvary, the place where Jesus died. Mainstream historians mostly lean toward this site, even if it feels less than picturesque. Emperor Constantine's mother, Helena, supposedly had a divine dream and picked this location back in the 4th century. The Roman temple that stood here, bulldozed. A grand basilica erected. It's been sacked, rebuilt, fought over, and occasionally set on fire ever since. But the kicker? Golgotha probably wasn't even a hill. The Bible never calls it one, just the place of the skull. And while the Church of the Holy Sepulchre does contain a rocky outcrop preserved under glass, it's more like a bump, a holy bump, with centuries of tradition, yes, but one that archaeologists still debate fiercely. Then there's the Garden Tomb, a quieter alternative discovered in the 19th century by a British general with more enthusiasm than evidence. He noticed a cliff face nearby with 2 sunken holes eye sockets, a nose bridge, and boom, instant place of the skull. It even came with an actual rock-cut tomb just a short stroll away. Talk about convenient. You step into that garden, and yeah, it feels right. It smells like myrrh and honeysuckle. Birds sing. The tomb is cool and empty. It's almost suspiciously on-brand, but historians largely roll their eyes at this one. The tomb style? Too old, likely centuries before Jesus. The whole skull-like cliff, possibly eroded by now, and there's the awkward matter of it being near a rock quarry and a major road. Not exactly the peaceful setting you'd expect for one of history's most solemn moments. Still, fringe theorists love the Garden Tomb. Some say its alignment with Jewish burial customs makes more sense. Others point to the peacefulness, the absence of religious turf wars, the fresh air. You don't see Greek Orthodox monks fistfighting over incense protocols here. And yes, that actually happens in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre every now and then. Godly rage in technicolor robe. And here's the twist that keeps scholars up at night. What if neither site is correct? Historians still argue whether Jesus was crucified in a public quarry, a Roman execution ground, or near a gate now buried beneath modern Jerusalem. First-century city boundaries are a bureaucratic nightmare, constantly shifting, poorly documented. And since Romans weren't known for marking their execution sites with helpful plaques, the exact spot may be lost forever beneath layers of stone, time, and prayer. But don't lose heart. Because wherever it happened, it wasn't clean. The nails weren't polished, the wood wasn't smooth. The whole thing would have been raw, brutal, and very, very public. The goal wasn't just punishment, it was humiliation. And yet, in that ugliness, something flipped. Somehow, a backwater execution became the central image of redemption for billions. You close your eyes and try to picture it. The sky darkening, the crowd shifting, murmuring. A Roman soldier yawning, unimpressed, and Jesus bleeding, gasping, whispering forgiveness for the people hammering him into place. Whether it happened beneath the dome of that ancient church or beside a garden path, the meaning echoes either way. Just beyond the walls, the modern city rumbles on. You hear car horns, maybe even a scooter buzzing past like a lazy wasp. A few steps from holy ground, someone's selling ice cream in a cone shaped like a fish. And yet, people weep here. Kneel here. Leave notes in the cracks of stone walls. Because maybe it's not just about where Jesus died. Maybe it's about the weight people give to these places. The memories layered over geography like spiritual sediment. The collective need to stand where history hurt and changed. You walk away, a little unsure, a little unsettled. One site is dark, dense with gold and marble. The other is bright, breezy, fragrant. Both claim to be the place where Jesus gave up his final breath. And maybe, in some mysterious, quantum spiritual kind of way, both are. Or maybe neither is. But you feel something just the same. A presence. A pulsar. Or maybe it's just the heat stroke kicking in. The tomb stands ahead of you low, carved, unassuming. It's just a hollow in the stone, like a million others carved into limestone hillsides around Jerusalem. But this one is supposed to be different. This one's supposed to have changed everything. You step into the shadows, ducking your head as you pass through the small opening. The cool air hits you like a forgotten breath from the past. Inside, it's barely lit. No grand chandelier, no echoing choir. Just silence and stillness. A ledge cut into the rock just long enough for a body. A place to rest or rise. You're standing in what might be the most argued over spot in religious history. Because here's the central mystery. Where exactly was Jesus buried? And even more puzzling, Where exactly did he stop being buried? You'd think this would be straightforward. I mean, you either find the tomb or you don't. But Jerusalem plays by different rules. Sacred ground here overlaps like a multi-tab spreadsheet created by a caffeinated prophet. You've got shrines on top of ruins, on top of Roman roads, on top of who knows. Let's rewind. The Gospels agree on a few details. Jesus is buried in a tomb, cut out of rock, belonging to a wealthy man named Joseph of Arimathea. It's near the site of the crucifixion, and there's a stone rolled across the entrance like a divine garage door. That description? It actually lines up with a particular burial style common for rich folks in the 1st century. These weren't your everyday 6 feet under affairs. They were family tombs, multi-use, like the Airbnb of the afterlife. A body would be laid on a slab, left to decompose, pleasant thought, and then the bones collected into an ossuary box for long-term storage. Space-saving and sanitary 1st century style. But here's where the ground starts to shake. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the same one claiming Golgotha, is also home to what many believe is Jesus' tomb. It's layered deep inside the structure, beneath an ornate shrine, beneath centuries of candles and cathedrals. You have to elbow your way past tourists and occasionally bickering monks to reach it. And when you do, it doesn't look like a tomb anymore. It looks like a set piece from a very reverent opera. But in 2016, archaeologists got a rare chance to peek beneath the marble cladding. And what they found? An ancient limestone shelf exactly where the burial bench should be. Bingo. Maybe, possibly. Historians still argue whether this is the tomb or just a highly symbolic one. Pilgrims have treated it as sacred since the 300s, but there are 0 GPS coordinates in the Bible. No turn left at the fig tree and head toward the artisan hummus store. And the layers of construction make it almost impossible to confirm with absolute certainty. Then there's the garden tomb again, our quieter, photogenic contender. It checks a few boxes. It's near a skull-shaped hill. It has an ancient tomb. There's even a channel for a rolling stone. Seems perfect. Too perfect, maybe. Most scholars think it's from the wrong time period, cut centuries before Jesus. Plus, its layout doesn't match the Gospel's description precisely. But man, it feels convincing. You sit in that garden, hearing birdsong, watching sunbeams dance through olive leaves, and you want it to be true. The contrast couldn't be sharper. One side is chaos crowded, ornate, loud with devotion. The other is stillness, wrapped in vines. One looks like a holy fortress, the other like God's Airbnb, ready to check out early. But the biggest twist? The tomb is empty. Always has been. You're not here for relics. No bones. No burial wrappings. Just the echo of a story that rewrote the course of human belief. Some say Jesus' followers got the tomb wrong. Grief makes memories foggy after all. Others suggest his body was moved, stolen, hidden. There are even theories claiming Jesus never really died, that he recovered, slipped away, and lived in obscurity. France, India, even Japan have all been tossed into the rumor blender. Fringe historians argue the tomb was symbolic all along, a poetic device in an oral tradition that didn't sweat the GPS details. And then there's the faithful, those who say the tomb is empty because Jesus rose. No tricks, no detours, just resurrection. And here you are, somewhere between limestone and legend, between archaeological ruin and religious awakening, between fact and faith. You reach out and touch the cool stone, just to say you did. You listen to your own breath bouncing gently off the walls. And maybe, just maybe, you feel the hairs on your neck rise not out of fear, but awe. Because whether Jesus walked out of this tomb, or another, or some unknown crevice long buried by time, what matters is that people believed it happened. They told others, those others built churches. Those churches built civilizations. And now you're here, brushing your fingers along chipped rock, wondering how something so small could ripple through so many centuries. In a world that churns through information, doubt and distraction by the second, this place remains still, empty. And maybe that emptiness is the loudest message of all. And now, you step gently back from the tomb, the cool of stone still clinging faintly to your fingertip. The shadows of ancient walls stretch longer now, and the hum of the city feels far away, almost unreal, as if the world itself has leaned back to take a breath. Let it all soften around you. The flicker of torchlight in the old city, the crunch of sandals on dry dust, the quiet whisper of wind through olive branches older than cathedrals. Every sound slows, every thought fades. There's no need to analyze, no need to solve the riddle completely, because sometimes the mystery is the message. You lie back in your own quiet space now, your bed, a kind of resting place, not unlike the one we just left. Let the blankets wrap around you like the folds of linen once did around ancient bodies. Let your eyelids fall like the rolling stone, drawn by gravity, by stillness, by peace. Whatever you believe about Nazareth, Capernaum, Golgotha, or that echoing tomb, know this. You're part of the same human story that stood before each of those places in awe. Wonder connects us. And tonight, you've walked through it all step by sacred step. So breathe a little slower now. Let the weight of the centuries fall away. You've traveled far enough for one night. Time to rest in your own place of peace. Sleep well, dream deep, and may your own mysteries, whatever they may be, stay kind and quiet till morning. End of script. Sweet dream.